Hey friends, this is the Miss Volfie from our Half Acre Homestead, and today I'm going to do a video on how I put the layers of the quilt together to go on the frame. The reason I'm doing this in a separate video is because it's come to my attention that I'm doing a lot of quilting videos and a lot of quilt block videos and stuff like that. And rather than take you through each quilt from start to finish with the layering and the binding and all that stuff, there's certain things that doesn't change. And one is the way that I layer the quilt for to put it on a frame or to get it ready for quilting. In future quilting videos, I'll be able to just post a link above my head and say, you know, to put your quilted layers together, click here kind of thing. All right, so let's get started. Now, I could go to the fabric store and buy muslin and sew it together and all that stuff, but this orange gingham, it's going to be on the back of the quilt. No one's ever going to see it. And this orange gingham I got in a box of fabric at a yard sale, and I think there was like 10 yards of it. So when it was cut in half and sewed together, it's exactly enough for the quilt backing, and it only cost me a couple of dollars. Okay, so here I have the backing fabric laid out on the table. And another reason I love using fabric that you have to sew down the center is it gives you a really good center seam to go by. Now here we have, now this is a queen size, but I got it at a discount because it had melted spots in it. So I don't have to use it all. There's some fancy quilt frames out there, folks, that you just have to attach the fabric and it rolls each layer up individually. I don't have that kind of quilt frame. So this is what I got. This is what we're going to use. So I make my backings longer and wider than the quilt top so that I can staple them and then trim it off. And this, I need to cut a few inches off. And I don't know if you can see it, folks, but there is, you can see the line, the seam of the backing through the bag. So that helps us figure out which way it's going. Now this side needs to be trimmed off about 6 inches. And I'm rolling this up as I do it because it then becomes my ruler for how much I want to cut off. Okay. Now if I fold this up, there's my line in my backing, and there's my points in the center, so we're centered. Okay, on to pinning. While Howie tears up the kitchen floor and dining room floor around me, I'm going to start pinning my quilt. Now, I believe it was my friend Frankie who sent me this wonderful jar of safety pins that have nice plastic covers on them. They'll be easy to see. And what I'm going to do first off is go right down the center and pin along. I can actually feel the seam of my backing. Now, like I said before, the reason I do this is I start in the center for starters. Why do I start in the center? So that as I pin, I can spread this out and make sure it's going to be even. If you start at one side and start rolling it up as you pin, what's going to happen is your fabric and your different layers are going to creep across, and your other side may actually be uneven. So if you want it to stay even for quilting, you start pinning at the center. So once we have it pinned down the center, we can smooth each direction, and then we start pinning the rest of the quilt. And you want to make sure that your pins go all the way through all 3 layers of your batting, your backing, and your quilt top. All right, so when I have this all pinned together, Papa's going to help me put it on the frame, and we're going to show you how we do. Now, as you can see, where I have pinned is nice and flat, even though I've been moving it and tugging it. Now watch. This is what I mean why the pinning is so important. See how this is creeped? But as I have pinned in the center and worked my way out, it will smooth out beautifully for more pinning. Now I'm going to get this ready to go on the frame. I'm going to cut off the sides because this is excess we don't need. I am going to leave the excess at the top and bottom. What for? For stapling it to the frame. Now I want to trim this, now that it's pinned, I want to trim this as close to the quilt as possible on the sides. Because, am I going to step on any nails here? Because this is going to be
Watch it.
My binding edge, and I want to make sure I don't necessarily have to trim the edge before binding it. Now folks, you're going to notice as we quilt this that this is not perfect in any way, shape, or form. It's lovely, I love it, but it's not perfect. And that's okay. The lack of perfection lends authenticity to the project. If it was perfect, you might as well have bought a machine made at the store. Right, Papa? Okay, now I have the sides trimmed. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around on the table, and I'm not going to worry about my parts coming apart. Why? Because it's all pinned together. Now again, we're leaving a good amount of fabric at the top and bottom. Why? So that when it's rolled up on the frame, I'm stapling this to the frame, but this isn't going to be against the wood, and I'm going to be able to quilt it nicely. I'll show you all that when it's on the frame. Okay, Daddy's bringing over the back piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the edge, fold it under, just so that I have extra fabric, and pop a staple in it. So now you want to keep this even with the top of your quilt. So when you fold the fabric, make sure you're folding it even so that when you roll it, we're not going to be rolling on an angle. You also want your staples going this way, not this way, because they will tear easier. Move these. Now, we want this, no, see how we're on an angle? We want this to be rolled nice and straight. So if you have to, always reach here and pull underneath, the whole 3 layers. You can move those scissors, dear. And we are going to very carefully roll this up without it being on a weird angle or anything. Before we get the other bar, I gotta trim this off. See how nice and well rolled up that is? It's lovely. Okay. Now, do you remember which way this was?
This way.
Yeah, but is it the right way?
Yes, it's the way I took it
Because
off
when
the
I
frame.
turn it,
Yes.
yeah, it will lock into place. Okay. Now notice, folks, the way this backing fabric is on here is that the seam that has been sewed together is on the inside, so we're not going to see it once it's quilted. Now with this frame, the way these wheels are, they have to go this way for the locking mechanism. And once again, we will fold this under so that we have a nice straight seam that goes along the edge of our quilt. When we're winding it up, we don't want it crooked. So here we go. You can tell my table's not level by the way this floats around on it. As you can see here, there is some a heavy canvas kind of tape on here. That's for people, if you wanted to, you could pinch the fabric rather than staple it, but I always just leave extra backing so that stapling it works and is easier. And if you noticed, I did the first staple in the center, which I should have done on the other side. We're going to roll this up just like we did the other one. And on the quilt frame, this is going to go. Okay, so first and foremost, we want this in here so that when this is pulled tight, it will lock into place. There, that's good. And we're going to slap this down so that now you see why the extra batting or the extra backing on here is so important. Is because I can get in and around here without the wood being in my way.
You can get that one.
And I can get this one more locked in place, just like that. And she's all tight and ready for Mama to sit and quilt. That's awesome. All right, let's get quilting.
Let's get ripping the floors up.